Can data predict the World Cup? Is a question that I asked myself, and soon, with the World Cup being right around the corner, we will have the answer. Now, I did it as my little data science slash machine learning project, as I like to do from time to time, and I will share it with you once again. Shout out to Claude for helping me with the presentation, so we see the data quite nicely. First of all, we need to answer the question of what data, right? So I was looking for some sort of a proxy that could be quite simple, quite quick and clever, but also something that could predict the results. And I took the value from the transfer market, the transfer market value for the players. And here you can already see, just from this graph at the beginning, that if we go down the line, we do pretty much see the teams with the highest value of their roster, the highest average value of a player in the roster, or even the median. You can compare them with the white being the median and the yellow being the average. And if we go down the line with these teams and the countries, we can already see that these are pretty much the contenders, right? So we have the France, England, Spain, Portugal, Brazil, Germany, Argentina, Netherlands, right? Like, even out of these teams, it's very, very likely that one of these teams will be the champion. We don't even need to read the next 40 teams or so, right? So just this little, let's say, check tells us that, okay, the average value of a player, or the value of the squad in general, is going to be quite a good predictor. And in fact, it is used also in many methods, but also combined with stuff like the ELO rating of the teams and also other rankings and ratings. But I'm just purely going to be looking at the average value, but then try to calculate something else as well. Now, already you can see, and I sort of try to highlight on this slide, the difference between the average versus the median. And it's quite important because when you look at, for example, a team like Norway, right, that has Erling Haaland, just one really, really good player, really expensive player, is going to drive up the average value quite a bit. That's also why it might seem that people are really rich when it's like the top 100 billionaires really driving up the numbers of, let's say, income. So that's why it's a lot more important to look at values like the median. Still, if we looked at the median values, the ranking wouldn't change that much, right? Maybe we would have Portugal and Brazil above Spain, right? And then maybe we would have Netherlands above Argentina, and maybe US and Morocco above Uruguay and Norway, for example. If we look at the median, so the middle value, so how expensive is the middle player in the roster. But speaking about the rosters themselves, it's important to also distinguish between the whole roster and the starting 11. And that's because the starting 11 is going to play the majority of the matches, right? So most of the changes are happening towards the end of the match, and not everyone will get replaced or changed, maybe in some potentially easier matchups for the teams and so on. But if we have a look at the value of the starting 11 versus the whole roster, we will see that teams like Sweden, for example, have a dramatically higher quality. Well, I'll just, for the purposes of the video, the quality and value will be synonymous, right? So dramatically higher value of the starting 11 compared to the rest of the squad. So you could say that Sweden has a very, very good starting 11, but the depth of the roster is not that great. And so once it comes to maybe the later on matches and you are fielding your players, they might be, let's say, tired. Once you need to make those changes, maybe against a team like Sweden, it's going to be not that easy to score on them early in the match, but because other teams might have better reserves, you might be able to beat Sweden perhaps later on. And these are the things that we can see from the data, right? Similarly, we can see Turkey, Uruguay, Switzerland, all teams with a really, really good starting 11, but also the depth is not quite there. And so you can see it for the countries that are a bit smaller, right? So Sweden, Switzerland, Belgium, right? You can see this sort of phenomena for the smaller countries, also countries like the Norway. But again, it's perhaps not the case for countries like Portugal and Argentina, and that is only because the biggest players, right, like Messi and Ronaldo, are actually quite a bit quite low on the transfer market value now that they are quite older. We'll get over that. We'll talk about it a bit later. Now, another part of does value actually matter? To answer this question, right, I've analyzed over 20,000 matches from the top 5 European league and the highest competitions between the teams. And every single time I've calculated the value of the starting 11 of the players for both teams in these matches and measured when the match resulted in a win, draw, or a loss. And there's a quite interesting phenomenon here where you can see that when the team is 2 to 3 times more expensive, right? The starting 11 is 2 to 3 times more expensive than the other team. The more expensive team, the team which has the players of higher value on the field, is still only about 50% likely to win the match. So draws are a big thing in football. And so the value is not that great of a predictor, but you can see that, okay, if a team is more than 5 times the value of the other team, then already it's about 67%, so about 2 to 1 chance of, winning compared to drawing and losing, right? So already, I mean, if we would go probably even more extreme to something like 10 times the value of another team, we wouldn't really get such data, because it usually there's some caps and limits on the value of teams in the high leagues, but we might see phenomenons like these on the World Cup, right? Given what different teams we might have there. Just want to sort of give you the idea behind the formula that I have created to calculate wins, draws, and losses based on the values of the teams. And I applied it to all the total matches that will be played based on the seeding of the teams in their respective groups, and then sort of broke it down to the 2 halves that will be played. I then ran a Monte Carlo simulation on 100,000 runs based on the team's value, and this is sort of what we ended up with. And you can see, because France and England do have the highest value of their squads, the highest value of their players, they are quite heavily favored by this sort of a model. And so they both stand at around 22% chance of being the champion, and both at around 33 to 34% of actually reaching the final itself. So this is quite a big chance, right, for the final being France versus England in the whole cup. Again, just according to these metrics. But then we see it as it sort of continues with Portugal, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, Brazil, Norway, and that's quite an interesting at number 8. But let's go and have a look at the other results now. We can see the 2 sides of the bracket based on how the teams are expected to make it out based on these results. So we have the side of France, which is then followed by Germany, Netherlands, and Uruguay. And we also have the England side, which is then followed by Portugal, Brazil, Sweden, and Norway. So that's quite interesting. These teams both being actually above Spain. So that is quite an interesting result that we have arrived at. Now, these are the top 16 teams according to the model after I have combined the form rank and averaged it all together. And so we start with France, then we have the England. Next up, we have Portugal, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, Brazil, Norway, Uruguay, Ivory Coast, and Sweden. So keep watching Norway, Uruguay, Ivory Coast, and Sweden, as these are sort of the dark horses of the tournament according to my model. Especially the Norway and Sweden might really accomplish something quite great this year. Then next up we have Colombia, Senegal, Croatia, Argentina, and Belgium. And you can see how low Argentina is actually in these rankings. Continuing, we're going to have a look at our biggest surprises. So we have Sweden and Norway being predicted to be a lot better by this model. And then we have Argentina and Spain, for example, being predicted to be a lot worse. And I wonder if this is going to be the case or not, right? Your average football fan would tell you that this is absolutely not true or correct. But again, it's just the results of the model, so no bias, no emotions. We are just presenting what we have found out from the value of the rosters and the players. Coming to the limitations and the hot takes. First, let's go over the limitations. So obviously, as I keep mentioning throughout the video, this model only takes into account the value of the players. It doesn't know anything else. It doesn't know who Leo Messi is. It doesn't know who Ronaldo is. It doesn't take into account no home advantage. It doesn't take into account the legends, right? No pedigree or tactics. And the data is sort of capped in mid-2025. So that could be also not a problem, right? That could also be the reason why, let's say, Spain is ranked a bit lower. But then I also wanted to do some hot takes so that there's some nice end to the video. And so the hot takes are that either Norway or Sweden will reach quarterfinals. So the Nordics, right, the Vikings, one of them will make it to the quarterfinals. Spain will not make the semifinals. So Spain will not be the top 4 team in a tournament, despite like how great they are considered to be. Argentina, the previous winner, the previous champion, will not even make it to the quarterfinals. They will not even make it to the top 8. And then finally, watch these 4 go far. And so we have Ivory Coast, we have Uruguay, we have Colombia, and we have Algeria. And these teams are predicted to, do pretty solid. Some of these are maybe predicted to maybe make it to top 16. Some of them maybe not. But really focus on these. And then once the World Cup is over, come back to the video if you saw it here and maybe leave a comment. Who knows, maybe I will turn up to be a total fraud, but also maybe after the World Cup, you will come back to the video and say, wow, this guy actually got it. It was unexpected, and that's the predictions that I really, really like and always try to focus on. Finally, we do have the models champion. And so the models champion is France. However, and this is quite important to emphasize, the model sort of picked France to beat England in the final. But if you look at the odds, it's about 23.6% compared to England's 22%. And so essentially these two teams meeting in the final then results in something very close to a coin flip. Now, probably again, because of the statistics, right, between these teams, if they fought, the computer just picked France, or the data picked France, but anything could happen, right? So pretty much what I'm trying to get at here is that France-England final, according to this model, is the most likely final that we will see in the World Cup 2026. That's about it. I hope you enjoyed the insights, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.